Leica Q2 is a very easy to use camera. Despite its kind of technical limitations that it's kind of limited in settings and functions and especially buttons as well, it still has a few tricks up its sleeve, or in other words, it packs a whole lot of punch. The menus and everything, they're highly customizable. And in this video I'm gonna talk all about how you can set up your Leica Q2 for the best possible performance, or mainly how I've set it up and how I've, during the past 6 months, figured out what works best with this camera. So let's roll the intro. Hey there, if you're new around here, my name is Andreas and I'm in fact a medical doctor working there at the local ER, and besides that I'm also a husband and a father, and with the very limited hours I have available in my week, I run this YouTube channel where I talk about all things creative photography and filmmaking and how to do it when you're limited on time. So let's cut to the chase and talk about how to set up your Leica Q2 for the best settings. First of all, some of the very essentials. Aperture is controlled via the control ring here on the fixed lens, and shutter speed, and those you'll obviously be adjusting just depending on each shot you're taking or the scenario. And straight on to the topic about how to customize your Leica Q2. Now the main essential is that you have different user profiles you can set in this camera. This is very similar to the top dial that you have on your Sony camera that you can switch to 1, 2, 3 or M1, M2, M3, those memory recall modes. This camera instead has 6 different user profiles. If you're completely unfamiliar with Leica buttons, essentially you long press a button and then it shows up a menu to which you can assign that button to whatever you want. Thus, when you click on the function, you get these different user profiles and it's very fast to switch between them. Second customizable button here on the rear side is just next to the shutter speed dial. That is set to the digital crop. Now I know that this is kind of a love-hate relationship for some people. Some argue against it, that you can always crop in post, and though that's also true, I still prefer to use it because it allows me to frame in camera the shots how I want them to be. Mention-worthy alternatives to set up this button to is, of course, you can set it to auto exposure lock or autofocus lock. The third and final customizable button is here on the top side of the camera. Press it and you'll get to adjust the ISO of the camera. Handy, if you ask me. The dial itself that it's attached to, I have set to exposure compensation. Now to tackle the user profiles, let's quickly just run through the names. Is EVRYDAY64, EVRYDAY125, Burst 64, Vivid 16, Harley 25, and the final is Monochrome 64. Now, essentially the first two, EVRYDAY64 and 125, are essentially the same, with the difference that the first one is limited to an auto maximum ISO of 6400, whereas EVRYDAY125 is limited to ISO 12500. This mainly because a lot of the times I punch in camera to the 35 or 50mm crop, and throughout trial and error I figured out is that ISO 6400 is ISO noise to such an extent or level that you can still clean it up in Adobe Lightroom. However, if you choose ISO 12500 as the maximum, there's a chance that the noise will be so much that you'll want to limit yourself to only shooting at 28mm focal length. The noise is just going to be so much that you really don't want to crop in on that. And thus, by splitting this ISO into these two different levels, I've kind of set a threshold to myself so I know how to frame my shots. In EVRYDAY64, autofocus is set to continuous, face tracking is of course on, the drive mode is set to a single shot. Now going down from here, the file type is set to DNG, meaning only raw image. Thus, the image profile, which says here STD, standard, not sexually transmitted disease, it doesn't matter. Metering mode is set to highlight weighted, thus I preserve the highlights because I'd rather crush the shadows than blow out the highlights in the majority of cases. White balance can be perfectly fine set to auto because again we're shooting raw images, so it really doesn't matter. Other settings not visible directly here in the menu is optical image stabilization, which I here have set to auto. EVRYDAY125 is exactly the same except with the maximum ISO of being 12,500. No other different. User profile 3 is burst 64. Now let me wrap it up this way, that essentially it's the idea if I'm out and about doing street photography or something and I see a nice car driving by, I can quickly tap over to burst 64 and shoot a series of it. And how I've set up this user profile, and if we go into the settings we can see that the auto ISO is maximum of 6400, thus the 64. Minimum shutter speed here is set to 1/25. Personal preference, could be faster if you want to. Drive mode is set to continuous high speed, thus I can just press the shutter button and I'll get a burst of images. And the focus zone is set to field, meaning this small box here that you can see in the middle. I essentially want to avoid having it set here to face detection because I've been personally in that situation that I wanted to take a picture of a fast moving subject, and for some weird reason the autofocus recognized a face from the leaves in a bush and it decided to focus on that in the foreground instead of the subject that I wanted to photograph in the background. Thus it'll only focus on the field that's set here in the middle. User profile 4 is set to vivid 16, meaning that this is in fact a JPEG only mode, which is set to the film style vivid. And of course single shot yes, face detection yes, autofocus set to continuous, metering mode set to highlight centered, and here I've actually locked the white balance to being cloudy, and this is something you might want to change. Personally, I think that the auto white balance of the Leica Q2 is a bit too much on the cold side. So a majority of the cases here in Finland where there's not like California style of sunshine or anything, and if it's terrible, I'll see it instantly and just change it. Auto ISO is of course set to 1600, thus the name Vivid 16. And a thing worth mentioning, with the Vivid profile selected here, you can go into the menu, and on menu page 2 you have JPEG settings. From there you can go over to film style, and from there scroll down to film style settings, and from there again go into Vivid. And thus by clicking on contrast, here you can see the settings, how I've adjusted this vivid settings. Saturation +2 would work in case you're shooting only landscapes, but expect all skin tones to become like tomatoes. This is a film style I use for the majority of times when I just want to take pictures that I have zero interest in editing in Adobe Lightroom and just want to get pictures to post directly to social media. Going over to user profile 5, that's Harley 25. This is a bit different than all of the other user profiles. Now, throughout this summer I've been riding a whole lot of motorcycle, and essentially when I've been riding with it I'm carrying my camera with me, having it there, so I can just stop on the side of the road, take up my camera, snap a few pictures, and then lay the camera back down and continue riding. That's the general idea behind this profile. Or in case you're like standing still in the red lights, in the traffic lights, you can just pick up the camera from there, grab a few pictures, let it go, and then light turns green and you can get going again. So the settings here are so much that, of course, autofocus is going to be continuous. Here I have again set the focusing to field, meaning it'll focus only where this box is. Again, no face detection, so it won't again focus on the bushes. Again, it has happened to me and I've missed a few shots because of it. Drive mode is here selected to continuous medium speed because when I'm riding I'm having my motorcycle riding gloves on me and the shutter button is difficult to hit. Thus I'm having a better chance of actually snapping a picture when the drive mode is set to continuous. Different from the previous one, this is actually set to take both JPEG and RAW images. This because I kind of like the out of camera film style. You can see already here that it's set to black and white, high contrast. I kind of like it to some extent. It's very fast and easy to use and provides good enough results. However, at times I still might want to import the images into Adobe Lightroom and edit the hell out of them. And the film style is in fact, again here if you're going to the settings, again, main menu, page number 2, JPEG settings, scroll down to film style, again film style settings, monochrome high contrast, and here you can see the settings that I have here. Contrast +2, highlights -2, shadows -2, and sharpness -2. And that essentially gives somewhat of a pleasant straight out of camera look that I'm at least happy with. And there's still a few details about this profile. Now, because possible oncoming traffic, headlights or sunset or whatever, I've decided here to use a metering mode of multi-field instead of highlight centered. If you're going to use highlight weighted, essentially it's going to expose according to the headlights of oncoming traffic, and whatever the hell it is that you want to shoot pictures of, it's going to be underexposed. Again, auto white balance doesn't really matter here, yes and no for the JPEGs. Your mileage may vary. The final user profile, number 6, monochrome 64, basically being again a user profile that is a single shot autofocus with face detection turned on. Here we're saving again both black and white high contrast with the same film style settings as in the previous one in the Harley 25. And we're saving again both raw images and the JPEGs, because again, the straight out of camera black and white JPEGs from this camera, they absolutely work, but at times you still want to give them a bit of additional tweaking or loving. And again here, optical image stabilization is just turned to auto. Auto ISO is set to a maximum of 6400, and thus monochrome 64 has gotten its name. This being this kind of a more of a artsy or artistic user profile, I've set here the minimum shutter speed to be 1/30, because at times it's pretty cool looking when you get the motion blur from people walking across the frame or cars driving by. That was a whole mouthful to cover these user profiles. Hope you learned something from this. Hope you get excited on how to set up your camera, and in case you're just contemplating on whether to get the Leica Q2 and to be able to use these settings, I hope you're getting one, because it's absolutely is worth it. If you enjoyed this video, hit the thumbs up button down there, and also subscribe so you don't miss out on the future junk I post here. Thanks for riding fences with me today, and I'll catch you next time. See ya.